You join me partway through working on a bit of a behemoth here. This is what I think is about an early to mid 2000s Zoom digital recording studio. This is a hard drive based unit with a CDRW drive, an entire PC size CDRW drive in the front. It's quite a chonker. This was pretty mucky when I got it. This isn't mine. This belongs to a friend who's passed it on to another friend, but it won't power on properly. It should have a 12 volt power supply with it, which I'm quite surprised about given the size. I thought it would have its own mains input, but it has a big 12 volt 3 amp power supply, which it didn't provide. So I've tried a couple of other power supplies, and I've tried measuring the current and everything on the bench power supply, which can do up to 3 amps, so it's a bit at the limit of the power supply. But it's current limiting like crazy, and even if I try and bring it up to near 3 amps, it's not getting up to voltage, and the cables are getting warm. So we've got a fault somewhere in this power supply. The original owner thought it might just be a dry joint on the socket, because he said it was kind of flicking on and off a little bit. I can't even get it to do that. I don't think it's a dry joint, given obviously that there's a definite short somewhere. Given that this has a 12 volt power supply, and I have had a cheeky little look at a couple of little pictures online before I open it, it's as I sort of suspected, that there will be DC to DC conversion stages which will step that 12 volt input down to likely 5 volts for the logic, and the hard drive will need a 5 volt and 12 volt supply, and the CDRW might need a 5 volt and 12 volt supply as well. There might be some logic that's 3.3 volts. It will need possibly plus and minus voltages for the audio amplifiers and everything in there. So it's got to kind of do a lot of complex shifting around with the voltages that are on there, despite it not having just a mains input. So I think to go in this, I have to separate the top half and the bottom half, and I think there's a few ribbon cables. I'm going to have to do some of that off camera possibly. I think I might put a towel down, flip it over, so see which screws are likely to remove the top and bottom half, and then see if we can get the bottom half back onto the bench. And the power supply is a separate board up here, so I want to look at that. So there's a couple of feet missing. It seems to use these big rubber feet that are just stuck on, and a couple have gone missing there. So we'll see. I think I've got some pads that might suffice for that. See what I can do. There's a trapdoor there. That seems to be opposite the CD drive, but I believe the hard drive is perhaps more in the center. Let's see. So we seem to have screws around the edges, and there's definitely on the back panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I count there, and there's also something on the corners possibly. So let's get those out. I haven't found a service manual or a diagram yet. I've had a very brief look, to be fair. There's also a grounding screw, I realise, on the back as well. It's marked there. So we've got machine screws into the metal there, so they're all tapped machine screws. We've got 4 in the plastic up at the front here, I think. Also, actually, potentially these as well. They're for the CD drive, I think. Those silver ones. We've got these, haven't we, in the corners? Aha. Okay. There are several ribbon cables inside. There's one here that comes off the XLR board at the back, and then if we open it up a bit more, we get it underneath that. I'm just going to pause here to put in something while editing. There's a mistake I was making that is more obvious now I'm watching the edit, and something also to be cautious of. These ribbon cables that initially I just pulled them out, I shouldn't have done that. They actually have a little plastic latch that you're supposed to pull forwards, and then the cable will just fall out. It will just release. You're not supposed to just pull on them. The little latch is there to put tension on the cable to hold it in place. This one right on the back with the XLR board, as you lift the thing up, it probably will spring up, but even so, you're really supposed to lift the little latch upwards before you pull that out. So beware of that. The second thing is, this really annoyed me all the way through working through this. If you look down to the bottom left of this picture, you can see this board at the front where there are 4 potentiometers, and it's where the input sockets are for basses and guitars, and the output sockets for the headphones. Every time I lifted this bottom section up here, it caused those potentiometers to bang against the bottom of this board, and if you do that too much, you're going to graze the edge of that board and potentially damage it. A couple of times I did leave little grazes in the actual solder mask, but no damage was done. But again, it could be so easy to either damage the board or damage those pots. It's a slightly clumsy way. You've not really got any choice but to lay it on its back to get this off. I don't think you could easily do this with the thing on its base, but beware if you have to undo one of these, because you've got to kind of slide it forwards and upwards. Be cautious of those pots on that board on the bottom, and don't just pull the ribbon cables out. Make sure that you actually undo the latch, and then the cable will come out easily. Then to get it back in, you've just got to line it up and then push the latch back in, and it will stay in place. All right, back to it. Then we've got a longer one here, which move that out of the way, has a kind of 45-degree bend in it at the bottom there, so, well, a 90-degree bend really. So that should come out of there. And then we've got this one, which actually has a bit of tape there, and that again has a little 90-degree bend in it. So I'm just going to straighten that out, and that one pulls out of there. So little retainers on them, and then that, I believe, is it. These are connected to a board at the front here, these little thin ones. So they're not connected to anything, and yeah, almost. There is a, I see a black and red power cable that goes down to a board at the back. That'll be for the backlight on the LCD display, and again there's some tape just on a bar across that goes over that wire. So at the top here then is a power supply, and I was about right with the date. The hard drive's got a date code of 0548, and 7 on the end of it might be a batch number or a day perhaps, because that'll be year week, so that might be year week day. So near the end of 2005, so perhaps a little bit later than I thought. Looks like we've got IDE interface for our CD writer and our hard drive, and the power supplies look to be paralleled. So we've got one set goes this way, and this yellow wire here to the CDR, and then this one goes to the hard drive. So those feed the drives, and this long connector here, which is, none of these are unpluggable, they're actually soldered to the board. They're unpluggable at the other end, I guess. This long one here must do the power for audio and the actual logic of the control board there. So looks like we've got a couple of little filter coils there, so they'll just be to snub out noise going out of the power supply. Got a big diode there. That's possibly a protection diode, that one or that one maybe. Okay, so two A1717 ICs and two 2360A ICs. I'm going to look those up and see what those are. Both those 2360As are JRCs. I think they're going to be switching controller chips because they're right next to these big inductors here and with these big diodes. So let's just check some diodes then. So if that's visible in shot. That's pretty low, that's probably a Schottky diode. No, it's not shorted. That's the same. That's climbing, so that's probably got a capacitor across it there. We'll probably need to put this on. I know that the top of it won't be loading it down, but we may need to put this on to again monitor the current and see if anything gets hot. So the supply is current limiting quite heavily. I've got it set at 12 volts there and about 1.75 amps, and it comes right down to 4.9 volts. I'm feeling a little bit of heat in the diodes. Oh, I've just spotted something. That B1184, which is probably a MOSFET, is cracked. What's caused that to break then, I wonder? So we should have short to the center pin. Yeah, it's completely shorted out. About the others. No, we've got capacitor there, capacitance there. The center would always be the same as the tab. No, but that 100 ohms, 100 ohms, obviously dead short in the middle, so that has been blown up. Yeah, that's showing, I think because it's on the same circuit, we're reading a short there as well. We probably need to get that off because it's obviously damaged. You can see the crack in it there. Get that off. So there's a little tiny capacitor just under there, surface mount one I don't want to lose, so because I'm going to need quite a bit of heat because these ground planes are big. Yep. Let's just see what that changed. Yes, I'm now measuring the capacitance across that and open that way. Let's go to diode check. Yeah, 0.5 drop across that. And actually, again, I think we've got a capacitor because we've got something creeping up the other side. I know we've now got an incomplete circuit, but let's just try with that on, try a power. No, it's still quite heavily current limiting. So still something odd there. Right, we've got another to remove. This is a MOSFET. It's the same as this one. It's a P-channel MOSFET. It's A1717, and that makes sense why all the pins at the top are all joined together. So we've got the gate on pin 4, I think the drain on pins 1, 2 and 3, and the source on pins 5 to 8. I might have got that the wrong way around, I can't remember. I'll put it up on screen if I'm wrong. But yeah, I should have seen that straight away, that with all the pins joined together. Yeah, that's a MOSFET package. I'm not sure this exact one is available anymore, but comparable, I've got the data sheet for it, comparable P-channel MOSFETs in that SOP8 package are around, so it's not impossible. Let's remove that because that is shorted both ways. Let's remove that. Oh, well, that didn't mess about, did it? That was quick. But we can actually do that from these holes. No, we've still got a short. It's not the MOSFET. We've still got that short there. So what else is across that? Turn down my hot air. Let's go put that to the side then, because we'll probably be sticking that back on if it's not faulty. Is that capacitor across that? I would have thought that would have been... Yeah, that's between something and ground. So let me use this capacitor. I need to see where these vias go. I'll have to remove this power supply, I think. That's weird. The switch shorts them out. Why would the switch short them out? Alright, that little MOSFET there has been soldered back on because I tested it when I metered it out off the board and it was fine. I can only think that that actually shorts out when the power switch is in, because when you turn it off, it maybe triggers a gate signal or something that gives it some sort of controlled power down. So it's one of those things, either polarity protection or a controlled power down, maybe to give the drive time to park the heads before the power goes away completely through the capacitor. That transistor was definitely cracked, so we've had an overload condition. Believe it or not, I've found the fault. No wonder this power supply was so difficult to find the fault on, because apart from that cracked transistor, the fault isn't in the power supply. It's the bloody hard drive. I think what has happened is the owner of this has probably put the wrong power supply in it. The 12 volts, this input, goes straight to, well, via the protection diode and the filtering, goes straight to the CD drive and the hard drive's 12 volt rails in parallel. I should have tried this earlier, but this was really difficult to get out, this Molex connector. But I pulled the CD-ROM, CD writer should I say, made no difference. When I managed to undo and disconnect the hard drive, but I left the IDE cable connected, it came on with a low current draw of about 300 milliamps, 350 milliamps, and the CD drive sprang to life. I reconnected the main board. Again, the current draws up a little bit. Bear in mind it's not running the top panel, and the hard drive's not coming up. So it will be sort of stuck in an error state or diagnostic state, I guess. But apart from us needing to replace that, there's nothing wrong with this power supply. These two are linear regulators, so we've got an 8 volt and a 3.3 volt here. I think that PNP transistor, the one that was cracked, is probably a pass transistor. So that might have something to do with the 5 volt line. So if this hard drive has seized, that might have also pulled out the 5 volt line, or pulled heavy on that and cracked that transistor. But the switching transistors and everything, when they're on, they're all working. So I was trying to find a fault on this board. I'm wondering if we're getting a short circuit, why is nothing getting hot? I'll point out the bit that gets hot. That microcontroller. There is a short in that microcontroller because I've got a separate hard drive power plug here. This is only capable of doing 2 amps, I think it is, on each of its 5 and 12 volt rails. But if I connect this up, it's got a little LED light on the power brick, and if I turn it on, you might be able to see it comes on really dim, and this little thing here is getting hot. And if I put power on, that is where we've got a short. So it's either a known fault to these Seagate drives, or I'm not sure. I tried sort of tapping the motor to see if it sounded like the motor was stuck, but I can hear that if I wiggle it. I think I can hear that moving freely. But no, we've got a fault here. The CD drive won't do anything without this being plugged into the drive, because I guess that's the secondary and this will be the master on the IDE chain. So I did manage to light it up and eject it when this was plugged in, but the power was out. So yeah, I think there's probably there is a jumper there, so I guess it's just the way they're organised on the cable that this won't come to life without that being plugged in as well, not easily. But it seems that's what it was. Just out of shot on the input board on the front, there's a board where you can plug in 2 instruments and the headphones, and it's no surprise that, because the guy's a bass player, the instrument inputs had cracked joints on these jack sockets because they've obviously been well used. So I resoldered those. The top panel that's got the 8 inputs on, I'm going to check that when I get to that. Just check that there's any bad joints on that, and I'm going to order that transistor to fix that there. But it seems that's what it was, and as I say, I suspect because the 12 volts goes right through, either the original power supply went belly up or the wrong one was plugged into it, maybe an 18 volt or a laptop supply or something like that, and something has cooked on this board and it's shorted that microcontroller chip. Alright, I'm having one of those days where I haven't really got a lot of brain function, and I managed to solder this new transistor on here whilst not realising that the camera about 3 seconds into filming said insufficient space on memory card because I hadn't cleared it. So anyway, the new transistor arrived today and that's been soldered on there. You have to be careful because I almost caught it. There's a plane above that which has got solder on the top, probably to increase its current capability, and if you're not careful you end up with a solder bridge across there, because I had to do that with the kind of big wide tip on there, the one that's hottest I've got. To be able to do that plane you have to use the flux and everything for the solder to wick underneath the pad for the obviously the electrical contact of that top pad, which will be the collector, but also so that it forms a heatsink, solders it down to the copper plane of the actual board. So you need the flux to wick the solder underneath that, and you have to get that really hot. But yeah, that's on there. I have power tested it. If I put this on now, we get a little peak about 390 milliamps, and it settles down to 340 to 350. Of course, no drives, no top panel or anything's connected yet, but I just want to check that, you know, nothing was getting hot. We've got no issues with that. It seems fine so far. So I've got the new hard drive as well that I need to take out of its package, and I've got to, where have I put it? Here we go. I've got to swap the this bracket over to the new drive. So I'll do that, and I think what I will do is test the new drive. It says it's tested and working, but I'll test it on my separate power supply. Just make sure it spins up okay. Need to make sure the master and the slave pinouts match, the jumpers match, so that is set to master. So the other drive needs to be set the same if it's not. So let's unpack that, see what we've got to deal with. Alright, so that was really nicely packaged. Big box with some packing peanuts. It looks like we've got anti-static bubble wrap. Now at this point you might be saying, well, why don't you stick a compact flash card adapter or an SSD in there? Ooh, there's a little bit of dust, we'll give it a clean first. You probably could do that if you wanted to experiment with the cost and the time of doing so. By all means, you absolutely could. I'm of the opinion that some of these hard drive recorders and that sort of thing, basically these things are on a PC but they're a discrete device, around this kind of time can be very selective about the exact drive parameters, firmware and such that they will work with, even though on the surface of it they appear to be a standard interface. There's every chance that if you put a different drive in this, it might not work. I don't have another IDE 3.5 inch hard drive to hand. I've probably got one somewhere, but it's probably got stuff on it, so I probably can't use it for the purposes of just testing. But it's a similar kind of story if you're thinking of doing a compact flash adapter or a special SSD. Just because it works in a x86 PC or a particular motherboard or whatever, or a Mac, no guarantee that it's actually going to work on this. So it's kind of up to you if you want to pay for that and experiment with that. In this case, I'm not of the opinion that this is going to get loads of use, so I just want to get it up and running in the simplest, bare bones way. So the sensible thing in my mind to do was to find as close to an identical drive as I could. Now this is the ST3415A model. The one in the machine was the ACE model. I don't know of any differences. They appear to have the same firmware, I believe. Let's double check. The firmware says it's 301. The configuration code is a little bit different. Site code is the same, so it was made in the same factory. This is a little bit older. This is about a year older. But the layouts appear to be the same, so I think there's a good chance that this should work fine. Let's say it's possible that any drive might work fine. Master and secondary jumper there is not set correctly for what we want, so that needs to go on that one. Alright, so I actually did some tests off camera while I was between camera batteries and whatnot, and I put the power in, and the hard drive's running. It's fine. I can see why it asks for a 3 amp supply, because on spin up of the hard drive, and again this is without a top panel and display connected, it peaks at about 1.7 amps. Once it settles down, we're on 820 milliamps or so. So I think next stage is to get the top panel back in, and then go through the process to format the drive and just see what it's telling us on the display, because currently technically this is on and everything seems to be warm a little bit, as we'd expect, but does seem to be functioning. So next step, get the panel on, see what's going on and get that formatted. Alright, sorry there's a little bit of glare on the screen, but hopefully you'll be able to see everything that I've got here. So I've had to break a couple of my own rules a little bit here. My power supply is struggling to power this up. I probably have to whack the current limit right up, which then kind of makes it sort of pointless because it's not doing any current limiting. So I'm having to run this from a 5 amp supply, just to have enough juice for the drive and the system to start up at the same time. It's just that initial belt to get it going. Those ribbon cables, I've made a bit of a mistake with those that I will try and address earlier in the video. They shouldn't be just pulled out. There's actually a little sort of cover over the front that you're supposed to pull, and then the cable will just come out loosely. So that's a little clip that sort of holds it in, and I can realise that when I was putting them back in that I wasn't doing it right. Potentially I could cause damage to those cables, so I need to address that earlier in the video, that I was doing it wrong. I had to have a couple of goes at getting this back together. The screws aren't in it yet. I'm just reconnecting those ribbon cables, because if you don't quite get them in properly, as I found, and I've someone else online when I was researching had found, the display won't work. So the backlight will work, but you'll not get any text on the display. So finally I've got that to work, and if I just pop the power on, we get check drives, the drive spins up, the CD writer showing activity, and we get check CD-ROM, then we get system file error. Looking in the manual, there's a button combo we have to do to get to a special service ROM, and then that should allow us to format the drive. But the CD writer has now got power, so the hardware is running, everything's talking to each other bit, but we've got the system file error because it's got an unknown drive in there. So hopefully I can do the key combo, which I need to look up, get into the ROM and do the format on this drive. Now it's happier with this big power supply. So we hold down the clear key, there we go, ROM utility, press mark, and we apparently, oh, external function error. Not ideal. I'm supposed to be able to scroll across to the options. Why are we getting that immediately? what does that mean? Let's see if I can look that up. It's definitely reading the front panel because the enter key, the clear key, the mark key work. I may have a solution. This is a copy of the original CD-ROM that should have come with this machine, or maybe a slightly later one because it is a revision and it has a system revision on here. I'm slightly annoyed that I had to pay 20 quid for this. I'll speak about that in a little while, but I want to try this first. I believe that there may have been on the original drive a little recovery partition or OS partition on there, and when we get that error, considering of course there's nothing in the CD drive yet, I think it's looking for that to run some diagnostic tools. I don't think it's entirely on the ROM. I think the ROM just calls up certain things on that recovery partition perhaps. When we switch it on without doing the clear button thing, it says check drives, check CD-ROM. So it's obviously much like a computer looking to the CD-ROM as a potential boot device. So I'm going to pop this CD in, and then I'm going to reboot the machine and see if it makes any difference and see if it will get us into that diagnostic tool to hopefully format this drive. It's reading the disk. I'm assuming this CD drive works as well. Obviously I haven't tested anything yet, so I want to switch it off. Yep. Switch it back on and just see without holding that down. Let's see what it does. Okay, still doing that. So maybe we do need to get into a clear menu. So let's do what we were doing before. Still the same thing. The CD drive is definitely still doing something. Watch this. It boots. It's working. I'm not going to show the entire ordeal that I had to go through to do this, but I will explain it. In fact, I didn't film half of it. I so nearly gave up on this. All along, it was a software issue, not a hardware issue. Ruminating over the errors that it was giving me, I wondered if, given the fault that it had suffered, it may have got something like a blown IDE controller, given that it had obviously shorted out the power and really screwed up that old hard drive. I sought out some advice to see what I could do about this hard drive issue, and I found a couple of sources. One of them was on KVR forums, a fairly recent post where they were talking about the drive format. It was recommended to take the drive out, connect it to a computer, and format it FAT32. Now, I probably should have done that before I actually put it in there, because sure enough, when I first connected it to a computer, the drive was completely blank, as in there was no partition data or anything. There was nothing ready to use. So I went through I first tried to do it on my Mac and it was giving me errors, and I understood why when I then switched to this old, I'll show a picture, this old HP system that I have, this Windows 2000 system that I use for a lot of diagnostic work. And I did the same thing to try and format the drive as FAT32, and it went through a full format and then errored out at the end. The reason became obvious at that point, that because this is a 40 gigabyte drive, FAT32 up until a certain point of Windows, I believe, is limited to 32 gigabyte formats in Windows. There is, however, a third-party app, I think it's called GUIFormat, that I used, and that allows you to format much larger drives by using a larger block size. So I tried with that, and I tried with again the full format, and it just seemed to stick at 0%. I'm not sure, maybe it might have taken longer. But when I changed it to quick format, it did it, and then Windows could read the drive and could see that it was FAT32. I tried an NTFS format as well, just to check that the drive was working, and it was. So when I went back to do this FAT32 format with this program, it worked, and so I popped it back in the machine and had exactly the same fault as I was getting, again with or without this CD recovery CD in the CD drive. It was suggested by the seller of the CD that you may need a specific CD drive in order for it to work. That may be the case. It's unusual that I believe in ordinary operation, pretty much any stock IDE CD writer should work, providing the master and secondary jumpers are all set correctly, which we've gone over that, they are. But in that boot process, it just would not make one talk to the other. And then I was messing around with it, messing around in that diagnostic menu where you switch it on and hold down clear. And I found an undocumented shortcut. If instead of pressing mark to get into that menu, which was given as the error, you press bounce, it takes you directly to a format dialog, which just says format, press enter. So you press enter, the HDD access light came on, and very quickly it said complete, done. So I was a bit skeptical. I thought, well, that was really, it was like 2 seconds or something. I thought, how's it formatted that in 2 seconds, even if it's a quick format? What's going on? Then I was doing a bit more research, and it was suggested on this KVR post that there are 2 partitions on the drive, which again, I'd kind of got this in mind, that's how it worked. And I thought, well, what if that format procedure, which I tried a few times, it seemed to work fine every time, what if that's written 2 partitions? So I rebooted the system. I got exactly the same error again. So I took the drive back out, connected it to the computer a second time. Sure enough, there were those 2 partitions that this has created. So the IDE controller's working, it's talking to the drive, it's formatted and partitioned and written the partition table data to the drive successfully. Those 2 partitions are called system and user, I believe. I now obviously haven't got it in front of me. And all this has to do when you do that recovery process is on the CD-ROM, there are 2 folders, and it just has to copy the files from each of those folders to each of those partitions. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. What if now it's all connected up, I try just doing that? So I put the relevant files into the relevant partitions, stuck the drive back in the unit, turned it on, and it booted. And it booted with the updated firmware, 107. I'm not sure what firmware it initially had because I had no way of getting into it, but it booted. And if I play it, this is just the stock factory demo that's on here, coming through my headphones. I'll not play a lot of it because it might have some copyright, but it appears to play fine. And all the lights and everything are all working. There's all the drum samples and everything. It's fully functional. So if you're trying to get one of these up and running, be aware it's really handy to have an old Windows PC, either with an IDE connector inside it, or if it's a laptop. It's lucky I had one lying around. I used one of these USB to IDE, it does SATA as well, but USB to IDE adapters. I was able, even on USB 1 on an old laptop, was able to manage it that way. If you've got one of these with the USB interface, which was an optional extra, I believe you can do that again to a computer, but I think it will have to be an older PC or Mac. It's not supported on Mac OS X, I believe, but bear in mind this is from 2004, 2005, so it should have been supporting Mac OS X by then, but well, I'm not sure. But I believe there are utilities on the CD-ROM that can work with the USB interface to manage the hard drive, to actually mount it as two partitions. In my case, I had to take out the drive itself and do it that way, which was a real faff. We've gone over what a faff those ribbon cables and everything are. But you have to do that. Format it FAT32 with that program so that it gets you over the 32 gigabyte limit, because this is a 40 gig drive, and then I had to put it back in the machine. Go into that hidden format menu where you hold down clear, turn it on, press bounce. When it says format, press enter. You press enter, it very quickly writes the partition table. Turn it back off, take the drive back out, connect it back to the computer. You'll see the two partitions there. You can just mount in Windows Explorer, put the CD-ROM in the laptop or the computer, and copy the relevant files. So I'll put something on screen as to what is supposed to go where. I'm going to put that CD, which I've realised I've left in the laptop, I'm going to put that CD and the files, I'll do an ISO and the files, I'm going to put it on Internet Archive, because I really think this is going to be the time when people have got these things, the hard drives are going to start packing in because they're 20 years old, and if they find a drive they're going to put in, it's going to do the same thing. There's a chance that this CD drive, because this is an LG drive, there's a chance that this is just a third-party drive that someone's dropped in, and while it may function fine as a audio CD writer and a backup drive, something wasn't happy in the kind of boot and recovery process, and it just was not talking to the hard drive at all. I don't think it's faulty, I don't believe so, I really should test it, but there's every chance that if you've got the actual official Zoom recorder, which I think might have been a light-on drive, it might work flawlessly, and I'm very happy for you if it does. If you manage to burn an ISO of that CD, pop it in and it works, then you won't have to mess about with a computer. But that's how I managed to get those files to go into the relevant places to get this to boot, and now it seems to be working. So I'm really glad, because as I say, I was so close to chucking in the towel, and here it is on this, because it was just not going anywhere, and I was convinced almost that there was a hardware fault further than what I'd just repaired on the power supply. So yeah, if you've got one of these that's flashing on and off, or it appears dead, definitely have a look at that hard drive, pull the power lead and see if you get power back. Keep your eye on if you've got any damage on the power supply, such as I had with the blown transistor, because that will need to be repaired. That will all need to be working fully before you put in a new drive. Of a similar model on that same forum post, there is someone that said they went a bit further by putting an SSD into theirs and then going back to a partition program to expand out the partition to use more of the available space. So they ended up with something like 100 gigabyte SSD. You still need, of course, those two partitions, the system and the user partition, for that to work, but they expanded out the user partition on this SSD and it worked. As I explained earlier, that wasn't my goal with this. The goal with this was just to make it work as stock, because it's probably not going to get a lot of use. So if you were feeling confident about trying that and you wanted to spend the money on that, by all means have a go. I think you'd have to do the same steps. There's every chance as well that maybe a completely different hard drive, as long as it's the right interface, even a larger hard drive, as long as you take those same steps, it might work. But I stuck with as close a drive as possible, and still had to go through all that rigmarole to get it to work. But that seems to be how to do it. So I hope that's going to be of some use to anyone who's getting stuck on one of these, because I really struggled to find information on formats and what possibly to do when I was getting these error messages, because it just says error. There's not really any documentation or schematics or anything out there for these, so I just had to sort of pick my way through it. It was fortunate that eventually I stumbled across that post. I'll try and link everything I've found in the description. I'll try and link the user manual and everything, because that takes you through all the shortcuts and whatnot. It doesn't mention that press bounce to format, but I was just tapping around buttons and it popped up, so it was fortunate, that little accident really, that it showed that up. Alright, I've been just doing a basic 8-track test with the Casio, of course. You probably hear a bit of that coming through the headphones. All seems to be working fine. It's a bit of a strange thing to try and get your head around when you're used to computer DAWs, but yeah, without obviously reading the manual. But I'm kind of finding my way around it just to test everything on there, and yeah, it all seems fine. So I hope this has been of some use to someone. Have a look in the description below for links to things that I'd found and the software CD on Internet Archive. If it's of any help to anyone with an MRS-1608, it'd be lovely if anyone who's got other backup CDs for different models would also put them on Internet Archive to try and preserve that data, because it's never going to come back from Zoom, and once it's gone, and then these will just be dead weights otherwise, and people may still want to use them. So that's the point, to try and preserve them. So thank you if you've made it this far. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.